You seem displeased, but just for once, I wish that you would utterly despair. The undying courage to persevere in the face of tragedy, the ultimate affirmation of life, the love for incredible potential of all human beings. Today, we'll be discussing life of Friedrich Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche was born on October 15, 1844 in Racken, a little village southwest of Leipzig, as the eldest son of the village pastor Karl Ludwig Nietzsche. Nietzsche's father was a man who loved tradition. He was a man who lived in honest poverty, following the teachings of the Bible with the utmost earnestness. Nietzsche would cherish the memories of his father until the end of his life. Karl was a living example of his own sermons and was a man wholly devoted to his family. For the first 5 years of his life, Nietzsche had some of his happiest years in his hometown, surrounded by orchards and flower gardens and the 4 ponds full of fish that was playground. However, when Nietzsche was only 5 years old, his father passed away, leaving him with a house full of women comprised of Nietzsche's sister, mother, 2 aunts, and his grandmother. They moved to Namburg, and Nietzsche and his 5 women would live together for the entirety of his adolescence. Later in life, he would claim that truth is a woman. He may be referencing the fact that the road to the truth is as complicated as his relationship with the 5 women in his life. All in all, his life in Namburg did not leave him with many fond memories. At 14, Nietzsche gains acceptance to the prestigious Schulfolta boarding school. Even as a young boy, Nietzsche showed a great enthusiasm for theoretical thinking. He formed a group called Germania with his childhood friend Pinder and Crook and wrote numerous texts on various issues. Out of the 3, he was the only one who kept the pledge to submit a text once a month, but it was enough to serve as an occasion to let his creative energy blossom under the understanding gaze of his old friends. In 1864, Nietzsche goes on to major in theology at the University of Bonn, but spends more time attending lectures of great philological scholars of his day, Ritzel and Jahn. Eventually, he earns the respect and adoration of Ritzel, and through his recommendation, becomes a professor at a young age of 24. In 1868, Nietzsche meets Richard Wagner through Professor Ritzel's wife, and is completely captivated by his charm and charisma. Sharing a deep love for Schopenhauer, the two quickly became close friends. From then on, Wagner would serve as the father figure for Nietzsche. At the time, the refined nihilism of Schopenhauer was very popular among the young people of Germany, who resisted the religious authority and wanted to revel in the romanticism of revolution. Schopenhauer's philosophy was a refreshing shock to young Nietzsche, who had been reared in the culture of Christian piety, and Wagner's new form of music drama was the manifestation of Schopenhauer's philosophy in art. In 1869, Nietzsche becomes a full professor at Basel University, again thanks to Professor Ritzel's recommendation. He was only 24 years old. No examination, no doctorate needed. Meeting Ritzel was a great fortune on Nietzsche's part. Having barely tasted the rumblings of youth, he had gone straight to taking on the role of an adult. Nietzsche, upon this sudden change, writes, "Now I must become a decadent." At the University of Basel, Nietzsche gained the nickname of Dandy, being one of the only 2 men who would wear a top hat on campus. For 10 years, Nietzsche serves his duty as a philology professor diligently. However, he retires in 1879 due to ill health at the age of 34. His body was not built for a life of a normal university professor, and pain was Nietzsche's constant companion. He confessed in his letter to his friends that if he had a gun, he would have blown his head off plenty of times already. However, Nietzsche refused to give in to the pain. He would only focus harder. With the incredible courage that has become a trademark of his, carrying a barometer and a thermometer, he would seek out a place that is suited for his ill health. He would write and develop his philosophy tirelessly while drifting across France, Switzerland, and Italy. Approaching the end of his 20s, Nietzsche finds himself drifting away from Wagner. Nietzsche felt that Wagner's ties to German nationalism had turned him into an imposter romantic who only sought to assert his influence. After parting ways with Wagner, who had been no less than a second father to him, he would concentrate even more on his life's work, which was philosophy. The pinnacle of his work as a philosopher is found in his magnum opus, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Nietzsche would describe the fight with solitude. To live alone, one must be either a beast or a god, says Aristotle. Leaving out the third case, one must be both, a philosopher. At this point, we must talk about the only love affair of his life. If Nietzsche in his late 30s were at the height of his powers as a philosopher, as a man of the world, he was tasting the most bitter pill he ever swallowed, and the pill was Lou Andrea Salome. In April 1882, Nietzsche's friend and disciple Paul Rea introduces Lou Salome to Nietzsche. Smitten with Lou's beauty and grace, who was descendant of the Russian nobility, Nietzsche proposes to Salome. However, Salome was never attracted to Nietzsche as a man, too honest and too particular to be a proper seducer. Nietzsche, who had grown up with 5 women, may have only learned how to assimilate himself amongst women, not how to win their hearts. He wished to get married, but after failures, accepts his fate of solitude and solely focuses on creating some of the best works in the history of the Western philosophy. However, as he would claim himself, he was a philosopher who had come too early. The public could not appreciate his work, and his texts were largely ignored. He even published his Beyond Good and Evil with his own money, but to no avail. His books did not sell, and in the world of philosophy of the late 19th century, Nietzsche's philosophy was never discussed. Drifting amongst Italy, Switzerland, and Germany, Nietzsche never let up on his struggle to complete his philosophy. However, in the height of his creative fervor, he collapses in Carlo Alberto Square in Turin, Italy. His body could not handle the insane pace with which he was pushing his work forward. It was like getting on a train that travels at the speed of light. The human body was going to give in at a certain point. However, Nietzsche never despaired of his frail body. It may lack the endurance of a camel or the menacing strength of a lion that he described in Zarathustra, but it was a human body that gave birth to culture and civilization on this planet of ours. Despite all these limitations. After the collapse, Nietzsche falls into a kind of vegetative state. His mother placed him in a mental institution, and his sister, Elizabeth, purchased copyright of all her brother's works and embarked on the business of living off of Nietzsche's fame, which ironically exploded after his fall into insanity. Fresh from the victory of Franco-Prussian War and spreading its wings as a new imperial power, Germany sought to crown itself on top of the world, and he wanted to use Nietzsche's philosophy to his cause. So they would go on to manipulate the content of his text, inserting anti-Semitic remarks and xenophobic praises of German nation, both of which Nietzsche completely despised. As a result of these tamperings, even Hitler himself would later treat Elizabeth as a sister of God. Almost 10 years after his collapse, Nietzsche lived like a doll in a dollhouse in Nietzsche Archive that his sister built as a way of siphoning more money off of his fame. He could not feel anything, nor understand anything. He was not aware that his work was being misinterpreted. He was even oblivious to the fact that his mother had passed away. On August 25th, 1900, Nietzsche bid farewell to the world, as the world was bidding farewell to the 19th century. His friend, Peter Gass, who had long been his eyes and ears, said, "Peace to your ashes. Your name shall live on as a sacred relic." However, such words would have made Nietzsche roll in his grave. He already said in his Ecce Homo before the insanity that, "I'm afraid that someday I may be declared as sacred." I wish that we can submit to Nietzsche's words that insist that all human beings are capable of unleashing our full potential and exercise stern discipline upon ourselves. Nietzsche, who affirmed all that is human all too human, was never a saint and should never be held as such. I would like to repeat the first sentence. You seem displeased, but just for once, I wish that you would utterly despair. For the affirmation of life that starts from the abyss. Bye. Paper Renaissance.